To tell you the truth, I never really needed the money. I wanted to get a summer job, more than for anything else, just to get my dad off of my back. My family had enough money, but my dad never really respected me. He always thought of me as a spoiled brat as far as I could tell, and I decided that the summer was going to change that. I was going to get a job, to show my parents I wasn't just a lazy bum, and I was tired of the fighting, if we're being honest. Anyways, as I said, I just wanted a summer job. I didn't want to change the world or anything. Little did I know, I would though, and not for the better. It was the first weekend of summer of 1976, a Saturday, and while my friends were out getting drunk, picking up girls, and going to football practice, I was going around to local businesses showing my face and asking if they had any openings I could fill. I was determined this Saturday that I would not go home until I had a job. It was a tall order, but I hated bickering with my dad enough that it kept me going. I stopped by McDonald's, In-N-Out, a few clothing stores in the mall, and even at Carnival. So far in my search though, nobody had much interest in a kid with that experience. I was starting to feel discouraged. Walking down the street by a local diner though, I peered inside only to see a job board with some postings on it. I ran inside and I bought a sandwich. I would have felt weird if I hadn't bought anything from them and looked at their job board anyways. There was a flyer on the board requesting help wanted. I took down the flyer and took a look at it. It was offering $1,000 to someone who was young, fit, and knew how to keep their mouth shut to go on a 3-day-long spelunking expedition and help document it. That was a weird request, even a bit sketchy, and $1,000 seemed like a lot to do this, but $1,000 in 3 days was unheard of for someone my age at that time. I couldn't just pass it up on a hunch. Also, in those days, $1,000 was way more money than it was now. The spelunking expedition even kinda sounded fun. The flyer had a phone number listed to call if interested, and I wrote it down hoping it wasn't too late to snag this opportunity. I rushed home as fast as I could, made sure nobody else was home, and I dialed the number. "Hello?" said someone on the other end. "Hey there, this is John. I saw your flyer and..." The person on the other end of the phone interrupted me. "John, we're leaving in the morning and we're interested in having you if you're willing to go. We can give you the money today. I just need to go over some things with you. Is that okay?" I was jumping for joy at this point. "Yes, absolutely, alright. Just talk to me. What's going on with this job? Can I get a name, by the way?" "I'm Rob. Sorry for being rude. It'll make our lives a lot easier the more people we have. This gig isn't going to be easy. We just want you to know that. We're filming a documentary and these plans have been in works for a while. We just never had enough people before. Are you good with that?" I felt like I was getting into something that was either over my head or I wasn't supposed to know about, but I was young, stupid, and I would have done about anything for a quick buck, let alone 1,000. "Well, okay, I guess that's fine. When do you need me to be there? What's the address?" Rob handed over his address to me and told me to meet him there at about 6 a.m. Well, that was it. I was about to make $1,000, an entire summer's worth of money, in 3 days. I went to my parents that night, and I vaguely mentioned I'd gotten a job, but I told them the next day I'd be working and then sleeping over at my friend's house. Back in those days, it never really bothered or rustled parents to throw plans at them like that. They just kinda took it as it came. I was barely able to sleep that night out of excitement, not only about the money, but it sounded like I might be doing something exciting to earn it. I hadn't really left town in years. This was the closest thing to vacation I'd had in a long time. And again, getting paid for it made it twice as exciting. That morning, I woke up at about 3 a.m. I packed a small bag, as they said they'd have all the food and water we needed, and I walked to the address they gave me. I got there a little bit early, because I didn't want to piss anybody off, and there were a few cars in the driveway already. One of them was a huge lifted truck. I assumed that was the car we'd be taking. Going up to the door, I knocked. Sure enough, a well-dressed man in his 30s answered the door. "John, I presume?" the man asked. "Yep, absolutely." There was a bit of casual dialogue, and then we got on with the talk. There were 2 others besides Robert, a large, strong-looking man named Steve, and a small Native American man named Ricky. Ricky looked, well, I don't know how else to put it, but like he'd just seen a ghost, or at least like he expected to see one. It kind of freaked me out, like maybe he knew something I didn't. Either way, I couldn't pass up this kind of money, so I stuck it out. "So, we're leaving in about 30 minutes. Steve, John, you've inquired about the nature of this work, and, well, it's simple. Native American legend has it that There's this cave in this region that houses a portal to hell, but not just any hell. A hell guarded by the spirit of a malevolent animal. Now, this creature was sealed away supposedly by a god about 1,000 years ago, and this is all kind of considered a bunch of hubbub and malarkey until recently. It's been kept very quiet, but 2 college students went spelunking in a cave a few years ago and ended up dead. The cave they visited was hidden by a layer of moss. Authorities followed their tracks and eventually, just recently, came upon 2 bodies. This is the weirdest part. Their bodies were half-eaten, lying at the mouth of the cave. And at the entrance of the cave it read, "Those who enter must be ready to die." It was written in a Native American language, and this had some of us thinking, was it a coincidence? Or did these kids stumble on an actual portal to hell? Our job is to answer this question. We're gonna enter that cave and get to the bottom of it. Literally. We're gonna find out what's there. Then Ricky, the Native American man, began to speak. Now, this is the catch. Some of you might think, what if we actually do find this creature? Well, in that case, we will either kill it or, well, we'll trade with it. According to legend, you either submit yourself as its host or you trade places with it. You become the gatekeeper and it comes out of the cave. Our plan, if we encounter it, is to sacrifice one of you as the keeper. You heard it now, and if you want to leave, you're welcome to do so right now. I gulped. This all sounded really dangerous, but really, there's no way. There's no such thing as hell, right? Let alone a creature guarding it. There's no way this could be real. I swallowed my tongue and went along with it, again thinking of the money. Steve glared over at me with a nervous expression on his face, but he didn't give in either. We both packed our bags into the car and left with the others shortly after. We got to the parking lot around 7 a.m. It was still pretty early. "This shouldn't take more than a day or 2, said Rob, and that comforted me. It seemed like everyone was on the same page about this probably being nothing more than a hoax, and even if it was clear that this was going to be a documentary, which they might even make some money off of. We hiked for a few hours to get to the mouth of the cave, and when we got there, sure enough, I didn't even notice it until Rob went up and brushed the layer of moss away. There it was, looking down into the cave with a flashlight. This thing was deep. You couldn't see the bottom with a flashlight, and it must have taken 20 seconds for a rock to hit the bottom. When Steve threw one down, I could see it wasn't easy too. This was starting to feel sketchier every second. I'd never even heard of a hole being this deep before, let alone one big enough to fit a person. We nailed some stakes into the ground, connected our rope, and threw them down the hole. "If anyone wants to turn around, you still can," said Rob, but none of us budged. I wasn't missing out on that money. I couldn't. As far as I knew, I didn't even have to pay taxes on this money. I was sucking this up. "I'm going," I said. I latched myself onto the rope and began rappelling down the hole before I could talk myself out of it. It must have taken 20 minutes to get down there. As I ascended, it got colder, so cold I was shaking, and then oddly, it warmed up again near the bottom. I wasn't much of a scientist though, and neither were the others, so we really didn't question it. At the bottom, you could hardly see the light of the top, just a faint shimmer of our world was left. It was beautiful, and it was amazing that a cave this large was hidden from the world for so long. The room at the bottom was nothing short of gigantic, the size of an amphitheater. All of our voices echoed to the point that speaking was difficult. In the room, there wasn't much. Some rocks and dust had obviously accumulated from the mouth of the cave, and our roofs came down, and oh God, in the corner of the room, looking over, we saw bones. They were obviously old, but someone had definitely been down here before. Not recently, but we weren't the first ones. There were also some spears by the bones, maybe even Native American artifacts. In the corner were some carvings. On the wall, Ricky stood there, reading it, but didn't mention anything, so I figured it was just nonsense. The large room was connected to a huge tunnel. Shining the light of our flashlights through it, you could see it was at a slight angle going downward, and there were some bones scattered around the entrance. A light breeze of warm air was coming out of it towards us too. Over the head of the entrance to the tunnel, there was even more writing. Quietly, Ricky walked up to me and said in a light voice, "Over that door, it says, 'Come this way if you seek death.'" In hindsight, I wish we'd turned around then, but of course we kept trudging on. Steve and I felt obligated by money. We went on for what must have been miles. The cave got narrower and larger and narrower again. When we finally came out of the tunnel into another room, it was a smaller room, probably about the size of your typical college dorm room. There were 4 exits lining the wall in front of us, 4 paths, something written above each of them. Ricky read them off: Gate of the Sun, Gate of the Moon, Gate of Water, and Gate of Fire. And then above all of them it read, "All of the paths will lead you to the end, but only one will allow you to live once you arrive." I was creeped out. All of that talk of portals to hell seemed like bullshit when you were above ground, but down here, it felt real, even probable. Rob spoke up. "If we're looking for a portal to hell, I suggest we choose fire." None of us had a better idea, so we reluctantly followed Rob. As we went down the path of the Gate of Fire, it got noticeably more narrow to the point that it felt like we would be crushed at any moment, but it looked like we chose the right path. After what must have been about an hour of walking through tight spaces, we saw something. A red glow. Light. But not light from the outdoors, more like light from a fire. There was no way. We were probably over 1,000 feet underground. Unless someone had got in right before us, there was no way there could be a fire. For that matter, I was confused why smoke wasn't pouring out of the room. When we entered, though, the answer was clear. In front of us was a large room. There were obelisks standing in line, lining the room, with torches on their sides. To the right and left of the obelisks, there were winding corridors, tunnels that went down to the side. But in the middle, in front, in between of all of the obelisks, there was a red, liquidy goop hanging on the walls. Steve was in front of us, carrying a tranquilizer and obviously uneasy at this point. I was glad he was in front. He was the largest of all of us, and personally, I probably would have been useless in a fight. Though I had a tranquilizer too, but I'd never even shot a gun before. Steve stuck his hand out, signaling us to stop. With his other hand, he pointed at something hanging out past a corner. Suddenly, it slipped behind the corner. What was that thing? There's no way that could have been human. Was it a snake? No, it looked more like a tail. With whatever it was gone around the corner, Steve motioned us to keep moving forward. None of us were speaking at this point. We were all really scared by what we saw. Suddenly, we heard Ricky scream. He was in the back of the line, and by the time we turned around, he was bloody, with a chunk of his side lying against the wall to our right. "Ricky! Ricky!" yelled Robbie, but it was too late. Ricky laid gasping for air in a pool of his own blood. And then, we heard a high-pitched, almost cartoonish laughter. It felt omnipotent, the way it filled the room. Robert, Steve, and I huddled together. I was facing the red goop on the wall when, out of nowhere, something came out of it. First just a claw, and then a hand, followed by a head. The head of a rat. It didn't even open its mouth, but again we heard that laughter. This thing must have been 8 feet tall, with a tail that was 12 feet long. It had large pink ears and sharp teeth. It wasn't a normal rat. It was almost like it was half human. It wore no clothes and stared blankly, emotionlessly at us, while it slowly stepped towards us. As it approached, I heard, You have to stop it." It was Ricky. "If it kills you and gets out, it will feed again. It will kill." I turned to him to ask what he meant, but he was already dead. "Steve, you have to shoot it," I yelled. He looked at me, he nodded. He raised his tranquilizer and he fired. The dart hit the rat straight in the face, but it didn't even react. It just kept walking towards us unfazed, staring straight at us. "Fuck this," yelled Steve. He dropped the gun and grabbed the machete that Rob was brandishing, and he charged straight at that rat. The rat didn't even budge or react though. When it got hit by the machete, it just bounced straight off of it. The rat slowly looked down at Steve, grabbed him by the neck and lifted him to the wall. The rat then asked Steve,
"Should I kill you all, or will you take my place?"
Steve looked at us with an expression that I can remember to this day. "I'll take your place." With that, the rat dropped Steve to the floor, looked past us, and began walking towards the mouth of the cave. We watched it walk by. Steve looked at us and said go, knowing full and well he could never leave this place again. We got up and we chased the rat. We had to do something. By the time we caught it though, it was already nearing the mouth of the cave, climbing the ropes. We climbed after it. It was way faster than it appeared. When we got to the top and finally caught it though, we were hitting it with machetes, shooting it with tranquilizers, and doing everything we could to slow it down, but nothing worked. And then Rob yelled, If you come with us, stay with us, we'll find you food. We'll bring you people, we'll bring you sacrifices, you won't have to do a thing." Rob looked at me, and I yelled, "Yeah, I'll bring you all the people you want. Children, adults. I'll give you exactly what you want." The rat stopped, turned around, stared at us, and then we heard that laughter. It turned out that our offers to the rat had proven to be exactly what it wanted: sacrifices. Rob and I were tied into this together. We had to start a front that could bring in a lot of people and be very low profile, a front that could bring people in to feed to this rat. We started an arcade pizzeria. We figured it would be the best way to lure in people, specifically children. It was a successful and lucrative business. It was booming, but it was never really about the money. This was the only way to keep humanity safe. Sometimes I regret my choice to go on that venture. Sometimes I wish I was never involved or that Steve had chosen to let us all die.